Hello, this is Angelia, and you are listening to or watching the podcast, Why You Do What You Do. The podcast that talks about human development and psychology to maybe help you figure out a little bit more about why you do what you do. And today we're going to be talking about aging in place and other options. Now, my father is still aging in place at his home. My mother-in-law's had to go to assisted living because her mental and physical health has gone down so much. So, again, this is something to think about before that time gets there. You know, if you're 60, you're considered old by most of the other part of the population. But the 80-year-old folks and older are older folks, and then the oldest folks are 100 and over. So, once you get to the point of 60, your kids will tell you you're old before you get there. But that's the official thing, you know. You're not really a senior citizen until you're like 65 in some cases, 55 in some cases. It just depends on the agency that describes this. But anyway, you need to be thinking about these things, what you're going to be doing, and make some arrangements. Like I say, my father's living at home for now, and he's already got a plan for if he comes to the point where he can't take care of himself and do things by himself anymore. He's already got a place picked out that he wants to go to. So, that's a good thing to be thinking about before you get to that point. About 8 out of 10 elderly heads of households own their homes. And again, those are the ones who mostly will stay at home, is the people who own a home, because the home gets paid for and you don't have that mortgage or rent payment to come up with every month, which a lot of older folks can't afford. And most prefer to stay there. I think all of us would prefer to stay there, but if you live in reality, you got to realize that at some point you might not be able to stay there, and you have to think about that, you know. Many, even after being widowed, and I know some widows and some widowers, it's a very tough thing, a very hard thing, but unless you let it be the end of the world, it's not the end of the world. It's something you can live through and make it through, and you can certainly stay in your home and, live without your, life partner. Is it going to be the same? It's, of course, not going to be the same, but, it's something that you might have to live through someday. Aging in place, as it's called when an older person stays in their home, may make sense for those who can manage on their own or with minimal help. And like I said, my dad needs very little help. He still gets out in his car and gets his breakfast, and he's not eating a whole lot like he used to, which is probably really good for him because he used to eat a lot of food. That man could put away 2-3 cheeseburgers and a couple of things of fries, so it's probably better that he's not doing that anymore. But we sometimes will go to the store for him, and when he runs out of stuff, me and my oldest son will go over there sometimes and bring him some food if we're out that way. So and he's actually gotten a little bit more independent. I think he's worried that he's being too dependent, which he's not at all. But I think he's trying to dial some back because he's worried he's going to become too dependent. He doesn't want to do that. He wants to be independent, and he's making his own choices now. He's grown a beard. He never had a beard before. He had his hair all short, and he's letting that grow out. And he said he likes the beard. He's never grown a beard, and he kind of likes the way it looks. He was, worried it was going to be all gray, but it's not. It's mostly black, and so he thinks he looks cool now. So, like I said, let your old folks do their thing, because, they might have been doing other folks' things most of their life because that's what they were told they needed to do, and now they're in a point where they're like, hey, I can be me, and hopefully everyone reaches that point someday where they're allowed to be them. And I kind of insisted on that once I got up in my 30s and got through therapy and group and realized I'm trying to live a life that everybody else wanted me to live. What about me? Have an adequate income or a paid-up mortgage. Again, like I say, if that mortgage is not hanging over your head, then, it's easier to stay in your home. my grandma told me when I was a kid, you'll never have any money till you're in your 50s and you get your house paid for and your car paid for. And she's pretty much right. So young people have some hope that someday, you'll have some money. But, that makes a big difference when you don't have that mortgage or that rent every month. It's more likely that you can afford the utility bills and things on Social Security or whatever you got coming in. So, it can handle the upkeep, and that's, getting to be a problem for us. We had to hire somebody. My husband did the roof with his dad years ago on our garage. But this time around, we hired somebody to put the roof on for us. So we're getting into that age group where, we can still take care of our business and we're still, got it going on. But, as far as climbing up on roofs and stuff anymore, no. So, that's something also to think about, is if you have the money to hire folks to do the upkeep on your place if you're going to stay there. Are happy in the neighborhood. And he's got a nicer neighborhood that we're not happy in this neighborhood. It's a bad neighborhood. There's a lot of thieves and a lot of drugs going on. We would, the police were down here just last weekend, so we'll be very happy to move out of this neighborhood, and want to be independent. And that's the thing. A lot of people don't want to be independent. They want someone to take care of them. Like I said, my mother-in-law is the type that she would be happy to have someone at her beck and call 24/7. But my dad wants to be more independent. Now I'll be the same way. I'm the same way now. I like doing my thing, and I don't want you bugging me about anything. So, I want to be independent. I won't be bugging my kids about, help me, take care of me. No, that's not going to be a thing for me. Some people are just more independent than others. To have privacy, again, there are older folks. I used to have a neighbor who would have ladies in, for overnight visits and morning visits and things like that. So, privacy might be something that folks are interested in. And to be near friends, their adult children and or grandchildren. Again, we were talking about moving, and then we decided not to take on another mortgage and move. And my husband had a chance to move to North Carolina for a job years ago, and decided not to do it because his father was, starting to have health issues. And he now says that he was glad he didn't do it because he would have missed that time with his father. And like I said, now my father and his mother are older, and so we're kind of hanging around till we don't have to worry about anybody having a problem with us not being around. And then my kids are great. They're willing to help out with the grandparents, so that's good. I know a lot of families aren't like that. A lot of families don't have anybody that's willing to help people, and that's a shame. But that usually goes back to that person. There was a woman complaining about how her family dumped her there, sold her house, and never visits her. And then you have to wonder why that is. Because there's probably a reason, so for older people with impairments that make it hard to get along entirely on their own, minor support such as meals, transportation, and home health aides often can help them stay put. And we tried to do that for our mother-in-law, my mother-in-law. Her oldest son tried to get the Meals on Wheels thing going with her. She wasn't interested in that. She said, I can get my own food to my own mouth, so she wasn't interested in that. We were driving her everywhere. He would come from Missouri and drive her to doctor's appointments. So, we told him, hey, you can get these buses to come and take him to doctor's appointments and things, like she's on Medicare, they'll do that. And she didn't want any part of that either. And she had a home health aide coming and checking on her, but she told them to go away. She didn't want them anymore. She didn't like them, and she didn't want them in her house. So, if she would have accepted that help, she probably could have still been in her home. But she didn't want to do that. And like I say, she was developing mental and physical problems where she was calling police and fire and rescue all the time to come help her. And so they were like, you know what, we're not doing this anymore. She's got to go somewhere. She can't stay here. So she kind of made her own bet on that. And it's something for folks to think about. If you become a burden to the community, to fire and rescue, police, they're gonna step in and say, hey, we can't keep doing this, So that's something to think about when you're trying to stay at home. I know they got the buttons, help, I've fallen, I can't get up, but she pushed that thing, 3 and 4 times a week. So, like I say, my husband and his brother and my kids all did the best they could to keep this woman in her home, but she was so persnickety and demanding, it didn't work. So, she's where she is, and I hate to say, you make your own bed, you lie in it kind of a thing, but that's the problem there. So can ramps, grab bars. Now my dad's got a grab bar in his shower now because he's fallen a couple times, and he doesn't even use the shower anymore. He kind of gave up. He said it makes him dizzy. So he's just washing at the sink. I'm sure he don't miss out on anything. A lot of older folks do that. And other modifications within the home. And there are companies you can actually call that can do all that stuff. They'll come in and they'll put in ramps and, bars. And, there was a woman I used to know that her mom even had the pull-up things on the side of her bed. So, there are ways to make it okay for an older person to stay in their home, if that's what they want to do. Older adults who cannot or do not want to maintain a house, do not have family nearby, prefer a different locale or climate, or want to travel, may move into low maintenance or maintenance free townhouses, condominiums, cooperatives, or rental apartments, or mobile homes. So, there are some people, they don't want the responsibility of a house. That's something that freaks my husband out, because he's like, people ask, what are you going to do with all that land? Well, why would you want that? Why would you want to take care of that? And he's like, why would you not want to? But there are a lot of people who don't want a yard, in a house to take care of. They don't want to bother with it. And some folks, like I say, don't have family that can help them. They might feel alone where they're at. So they might want to go into an over 55 community where there are people like them in the same boat. We always say that if we win the lottery, we're going to Hawaii because we don't like our climate. It's too cold here in the winter. It's too hot in the summer. So we'd like to go where it's between like 60 and 80 all year round. And, that would be the ultimate. But, we haven't won the lottery yet. So, and like I said, there are a lot of people who like to travel. And, if you have a house, that might be worrisome. So, but especially here in the United States, a lot of people do that. They'll downsize. They'll sell the house, move into a condo or whatever, which is the opposite of what usually they do in England, which is they have a townhouse where they live, when they work and raise the kids and everything, and then when they retire, they sell the lot and move out to the country and have a country house. So, there's shows on TV about it, escape to the country. So, that's every place is different. People in different societies do things differently. So, most older people do not need much help. And that's true. If you've tried to eat right and keep in shape, you don't need a lot of help. And those who do can often remain in the community if they have at least one person to depend on. And I know a lady, and she just had a friend that would come over and help her, and her friend practically lived with her, and she did end up passing away, and that's hard. But like I say, if you got one person you can depend on, that will be there for you, all you gotta do is pick up the phone, and they're there as soon as they can get there, then you're probably gonna be okay. The single most important factor keeping people out of institutions is being married. And like I say, don't run out and grab the first person you can find and get married so you can stay in your house. But statistically speaking, if you have a spouse, you're much more likely to live at home till you pass away than without. As long as a couple are in a relatively good health, they can usually live fairly independently and care for each other. And I know a couple, she's had an operation, and now her husband's taking care of her, and she says he's great. He doesn't make her feel like, she's a burden or anything, so she just feels really blessed. And I'm so happy for them, that they have each other and, can be like that. Because not a lot of people do, once they get to that age. This is where I live anyway. It's a blessing when you have a spouse that is going to be there for you and will help take care of you. The issue of living arrangements becomes more pressing when one or both become frail. And like I say, I used to work in a nursing home. We had a couple there. They both ended up there. They both became frail. They were doing okay for a while, and then we figured out why the kids really just didn't want anything to do with them, because the male was into punching her in the face and blacking her eyes, so they had to be separated. So there's always something. You find out things when you have to be enmeshed in people's lives. But yeah, if you become frail and they become frail, then you're both probably going to have to go somewhere. And me and my husband have joked, we really like the place that my mother-in-law's at, and we're like, heck yeah, we would come live here if we had to. It's a nice place. Infirm or disabled, or when one spouse dies. Now, I know a friend of mine who her husband passed away fairly young, and she became a widow, and he was, making the lion's share of the money, and she had to go back to work at a better job, a harder job, but it was an adjustment for her because she still had teenage girls at home, and she wasn't super happy about it, but she's doing a really good job, and there for a while she was faltering and kind of doing things that I did when I was in my 20s, looking for love in all the wrong places. But she got her stuff together, and she's taking care of business now, and I'm proud of her for doing that. People who are not living with a spouse most often get help from a child, usually a daughter. And that's true most of the time. I know it's the daughter taking care of business, because the daughter's like, I'm not going to leave them like that. They might not have been the greatest, but I'm not going to let them suffer. I'm not going to let them go without food. I'm not going to let them, not have the things they need to take care of themselves. Because I think daughters are a little more conscientious about that thing in general, especially I think women in general are more conscientious about taking care of folks. It's what we do. We're the nurturers. So, that's just a fact. Those who cannot call on a spouse or child usually turn to friends. Like I said, I knew a woman, and she had a friend come live with her. And her friend lived with her for years. And, like I said, if you got a friend like that, you're really darn lucky. I supposedly have a lot of friends, but like I said, there's probably about 5 who I know that if I was to call them and say, hey, this is what's going on, they would want to come talk to me. They would want to be there. Like I say, if you have a couple good friends, you're doing good. The 2 most common living arrangements for older adults without spouses are living alone and living with adult children. And, I know folks who's moved mom and dad in, that's why they have mother-in-law suites, down in, have a lot of those, Florida, Hawaii, different places, have mother-in-law suites. So, that can be a situation. And that way the older person has their own little space and they can live their own little life, and the couple can have some privacy, and the kids can run back and forth between grandma's and, their house, and it works out for some folks. And then at living in institutions, like I say, some folks, they need 24/7 care. They need someone to be there in case they fall or to keep them from letting strangers into their house and making dumb decisions with, giving bunches of money to, preachers that are trying to sell them something or whatever. So, some folks need to go somewhere to be safe. It's for their own good. And so that you can sleep at night knowing that the older person is safe and not putting themselves in dangerous situations. And alternative forms of group housing. Like I said, there's 55 and older communities where you can go. My father looked at one of those out by where he lived. So, there are a lot of options for folks, to look into. And that's something you need to be thinking about. Like I said, about time you turn 60 is the time you need to start thinking about these things. Because by the time you get 80, you might not be able to think about these things. So, stitch in time saves 9, as they say. A serious problem for dependent older adults is abuse by caregivers. And like I say, I had a brother-in-law that's what he did. He investigated elder abuse. He worked for the state. And, he would go investigate cases of, complaints of elder abuse. So, unfortunately, that's kind of a case. And like I said, that's kind of what Fire and Rescue put to my son. Kind of upset him a little bit and said, I know she wants to stay in her home and you are trying to keep her in her home, but she's now falling too much, and that could be construed, as neglect. And then everybody's like, whoa, you don't know her. She's stubborn and mean, and, but after all, once you get to that point where you're having advancing dementia and everything, you're really not able to make intelligent decisions for yourself. So somebody had to step up and take the reins. And like I said, me and my middle son talked to my husband and the brother and said, hey, here's what's going on and something needs to be done, or you're going to probably end up in trouble because you're listening to her. We understand she's an overbearing, stubborn mother who never let anyone have any way except hers. But now's the time that she needs to be taken care of and protected because she's making bad decisions for herself. And, she's hurting herself, making bad decisions for herself. So, finally somebody had to be the voice of reason, and make sure that she was being taken care of appropriately. Like my dad over there, I took him some dry shampoo and a nail file, an electric, nail file for his toenails, because he doesn't like going to the podiatrist and getting cut, and he can't cut them anymore. So, we're trying to make sure he's got what he needs and take care of himself. So that is something to think about, whether you're going to age in place or choose another option. So like I say, once you're old enough to collect Social Security and get on Medicare, that's something to start thinking about and start talking to your kids about, because they're probably going to be involved in that decision as well. And make your wishes known, because like I say, dementia and Alzheimer's happens. It can happen to anybody, and there may come a point where you are not able to make rational, intelligent decisions for yourself. Your common sense kind of goes out the window, and you need to have everybody on the same page. What happens if I get this way? If this happens, what happens? So, like I say, by the time time you're 65 or so, these are things you need to start thinking about, and thinking about other options. If you can't stay in your home anymore, what happens? Do you go someplace? Is there someplace you'd like to go? Maybe you want to start, thinking about places and looking into places. Like I said, my dad learned from looking at a place for my grandfather, and he found one he liked. He's like, I love this place. This is where I want to go. So it's like, okay, you get to that point, we'll put you there. Me and my aunt got our marching orders. He got a little folder, got it all laid out for us. So, when the time comes, we'll go by what he wants. So, like I say, aging in place or other options, something you need to think about before you become an older adult. So that's where I'm going to leave you for today. I hope that helped you figure out maybe a little bit more about why you do what you do. Please like and share this educational program so we can spread it around the world. If you want to help me out, subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you want to help me out even more, go to my Patreon page and become a patron. Thanks for watching or listening. That's all for now. Until next time.